third unit, period 3, Roman numeral 2, discusses the diplomatic aspects leading up to the Revolutionary War. The first diplomatic aspect leading up to the Revolutionary War was the English use of the Proclamation of 1763. The Proclamation of 1763 was an attempt by the English king, because of the cost associated with the French and Indian War and the debt that England had acquired. The king did not want to protect English settlers moving into the very territory, the Ohio River Valley, that the war had been fought over. The Ohio River Valley here is where I'm showing on the mouse. And so he drew an imaginary line across the Appalachian Mountains and forbid the English settlers from moving west into the territory known as the Ohio River Valley. And this ticked the colonists off very much, because they wanted to be able to move there for the land to be able to expand their farms and grow their families. And this was King George III's proclamation. Another aspect leading up to the Revolutionary War that played an important role was the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was the first direct tax passed by the British Parliament on the English colonists. This tax was not placed on the English living in Great Britain. It was only placed on the colonists. And this they felt was unfair, because they did not have a say-so in the British Parliament to stand up against this. So this was, what you need to remember by this is this was the first direct tax against the colonists. A group was formed to protest this Stamp Act, and they became known as the Sons of Liberty. This is a propaganda poster as an example of something that the Sons of Liberty did to protest the Boston Massacre. They put these posters all up over Boston. Well, Boston had a population of about 25, 30, 35,000 people, but in this shooting by British troops, 5 American colonists were killed, yet the Sons of Liberty put these posters up claiming that it was a massacre. They also, the Sons of Liberty, attacked British tax collectors. They did a technique called tar and feather, which would sometimes kill the tax collectors and make examples of them. They burned tax collectors, or stuffed images, scarecrows as you will, of tax collectors from trees to intimidate the tax collectors from collecting the tax. Another group was formed called the Daughters of Liberty, and their technique of protest was probably more successful than the Sons of Liberty, and their technique was to boycott British goods. And that's what this picture here shows. Another diplomatic aspect that led to the Revolutionary War was the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were passed by the British Parliament in response to the Boston Tea Party. The colonists participated in the Boston Tea Party because of an act passed by Parliament called the Tea Act. The Tea Act gave a British company a monopoly on tea trade. This upset the colonists because this forced them to pay higher prices for tea, which was very important to them. And so to protest this, the Sons of Liberty dressed up as Indians, became intoxicated, climbed aboard the British tea ships, and dumped the tea in the Boston harbor. To punish the colonists, the Intolerable Acts were passed by the British Parliament. 1, they closed the port of Boston. 2, they began to ban town meetings. 3, any colonial officials accused of a crime in the colonists would be tried in England. And 4th, the British began to quarter troops in American homes. In response to the Intolerable Acts, the colonists formed the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. Not a lot was accomplished at the First Continental Congress, except the committees of correspondence were formed. Now, while war was not called for, this committee did allow for communication among the 13 colonies and begin to formally write down their grievances against the king and then share them with the other colonies. Between 1774, highlighted here, And 1775, highlighted here, there were 3 battles fought between the English and the colonists. The battles of Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill. These battles were fought without any declaration of war. And so therefore, the colonists felt that that was necessary and formed the Second Continental Congress in 1775. They put George Washington in charge of the army. So you can see there they're starting to take this thing more seriously. And they're going to formally draw up the Declaration of Independence, which we'll talk about in the next section.